He really focuses on the integrated food security phase classification, the IPC. He positions the IPC as this meeting of a technical and a political consensus. So what is that? A technical consensus is this idea of how you measure food insecurity and then how that's put into qualitative categories around food insecurity or famine. The political consensus is really about the institutions within the UN and the member states coming to an agreement about what can be called a famine. There's a relationship here between the technical and the political, but I think drawing out this difference is really key to understanding IPC in general. But where Francois really develops his work is by looking to media studies to really understand, well, how is the IPC communicated? How does it filter through a media system? For this, he focuses on the idea of mediatization, so the way that IPC has been mediatized. And here he finds particularly useful the work from Boltanski, who argues that there are two dominant forms of representation of crises. And that's the spectacular. This is the sort of highly emotive, sort of raw, emotive representation of crises that the news media often adopt, but sometimes NGOs as well. And this is then matched with a technocratic representation, which is very much to do with how data is used and science is used to describe a situation, almost using this objective lens that is within the IPC. So to sort of explore this meeting point of the IPC, technocratic consensus, and the role of media, then he looks at two famines. The first one is in Yemen, which he refers to as an overexposed famine. Here he argues that the data was quite patchy and unreliable, but the narrative was along the lines of kind of a certainty of food insecurity. And it was only actually a few organisations, most prominently MSF, who said, well, no, there isn't actually an immediate risk of famine in Yemen, which actually proved to be the case. So he sets this overexposed famine against an underexposed famine in Madagascar. So he refers to the fact in the late 2020 there was a silent crisis with the food insecurity in Madagascar. It wasn't really receiving much attention. And then by the middle of 2021, there was a climate crisis where the IPC declared that a famine was occurring. And this sort of rapid shift from something that was being ignored or wasn't understood properly, wasn't categorized properly, through 6 months later, 7 months later, to being categorized as a famine. Well, Francois argues that this, yes, is due to IPC delays and inaccuracies in their data, but actually, quite importantly for his theoretical framing as well, is the lack of access of journalists to be able to be on the ground in Madagascar to get those sort of personal, emotive stories that are critical to what he refers to, using Boltanski's work, as the spectacular representation of famine. And this is what's really good about Francois's work, is it reaches across the divide between conflict and humanitarian studies to media studies to really draw out a good critique of how the IPC is not just a technocratic process of crunching the data, but also something that sits within media systems. And this is really what we're trying to do within this special issue as well.